The bell above the restaurant door hadn't stopped jingling all morning. A Benny's Haven smelled like Sunday blessings. Smoked turkey wings, collard greens simmering in broth, and cornbread crisping to a golden crown. Families laughed, gospel played softly, and a Benny Carter moved between tables with the grace of a woman who believed her purpose had finally found a home. Then the doors burst open. 3 uniformed officers stormed inside like they were raiding a drug den, not a soul food restaurant. Tables rattled, customers froze, children cried. Detective Marshall Huxley stepped forward, his voice booming. "This establishment is operating unlawfully. Shut it down, now." A Benny's smile collapsed. "What? On what grounds?" Her voice trembled, but her posture stood tall. Huxley didn't answer. Officers ripped down her A health rating, slapped a lurid orange clothes sticker on her spotless glass door, and ordered everyone out. Patrons protested, shouting about injustice, but the cops treated them like criminals. A Benny stood in the middle of her dream, ovens still warm, plates half served as humiliation swallowed her whole. Cameras flashed. Someone was recording. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" Huxley smirked. "Because we can." Her life's work was gone. Or so they thought. A Benny Carter was not born with a silver spoon. She was born with a cast-iron skillet and a lineage of flavors carved into memory. Her grandmother, Mama Dorothy, used to say, "Food ain't just food, baby, it's history served warm." To a Benny, those words were scripture. Every spice she layered into her dishes carried echoes of ancestors who survived, endured, and still found sweetness in their struggle. Savannah's East River District was where she grew up, a neighborhood alive with porch conversations, kids chasing basketballs, and elders who never tired of telling stories about the way things used to be. But the one thing the community lacked was a place that felt like home. A sanctuary where people could gather, laugh, heal, and break bread together. That gap gnawed at a Benny for years. She worked as a hotel chef, a line cook, and even as a caterer, always dreaming of something more, something hers. The restaurant came together, piece by piece. A second-hand oven from an auction. Hand-painted signs from a local artist who owed her a favor. Chairs bought in mismatched sets and sanded until they gleamed. She named it a Benny's Haven, a place where people could walk in burdened and walk out lighter. It wasn't just a business. It was her heart, carved into wood and brick. From the very first week, the community recognized it. They didn't just eat her cornbread, they inhaled hope. Her mac and cheese felt like Sunday at Grandma's. Her oxtails reminded men of mothers long gone. Her peach cobbler made strangers cry. Soon, the restaurant became more than a place to eat. It was where proposals happened, where birthday candles were blown out, where church choirs gathered after service to eat until they could barely stand. But success has a scent, and not everyone likes it. A few blocks away stood the River Crown Bistro, an overpriced establishment owned by the wealthy and entitled Grant Norville, brother-in-law to Detective Marshall Huxley. River Crown had chandeliers, marble floors, and a menu so confusing most folks gave up halfway through reading it. Yet despite all the polish, it sat half-empty every night. People wanted soul, not spectacle. Norville saw Benny's Haven as a threat. A woman with no financial empire, number investors, and no pedigree had somehow become the talk of the town. His frustration was a slow-boiling kettle, made worse when local newspapers started featuring a Benny. Bloggers wrote about her southern recipes. Social media accounts buzzed with praise. Customers came from other towns just to taste her fried catfish, crispy on the outside, tender like secrets on the inside. And then came the moment everything shifted. The review. A food critic from Southern Heritage magazine visited without announcing himself. He ordered silently, ate politely, and vanished like a ghost. 2 weeks later, the magazine arrived on doorsteps with a headline that sent shockwaves across Savannah. The best soul food in Georgia isn't in Atlanta. It's at a Benny's Haven. Phones rang nonstop. Reservations filled weeks in advance. People lined up around the block. A Benny cried the first time she saw customers waiting outside before sunrise. She had done it. She had built something worthy of her grandmother's legacy, but to Grant Norville, that article felt like a slap. How is she winning? He seethed during Sunday brunch at River Crown. She's just a cook. That one word just was enough to poison a man consumed by ego. Norville turned to his brother-in-law, Detective Marshall Huxley, a man who had climbed ranks not through merit but intimidation. Huxley was known in Savannah as a walking storm cloud, the kind who thundered into rooms and left destruction behind. His badge gleamed like authority, but his conscience was hollow. "She's costing me business," Norville complained. "Do something about it." "Restaurants get shut down all the time," Huxley replied coldly. "All it takes is the right inspection." Thus began the harassment. First, routine police stops for customers, headlights checked, plates examined, petty tickets issued. People stopped coming at night. Then anonymous complaints were filed about noise, though Benny's Haven closed by 10 p.m., then mysterious delays with city permits. Each time a Benny asked questions, she was met with polite bureaucratic shrugs. Still, she endured. Her daughter, Zola Carter, watched everything with quiet fire in her eyes. At 14, Zola was whip-smart and fiercely protective. She spent afternoons doing homework in a booth while helping with orders when things got busy. To her, the restaurant was more than livelihood. It was proof that black dreams didn't have to shrink. "Mom," she would say, "bullies push hardest right before they fall." And the Benny, tired yet hopeful, would smile. She believed good people eventually won. But good people sometimes underestimate how far the wicked are willing to go. When business kept growing, Norville panicked. He needed a bigger blow, one that would cripple a Benny beyond recovery. That's when he suggested something darker. "Can't you shut our place down? Make it legal? Call it safety. Call it whatever you want, just end her." Huxley didn't blink. He arranged a surprise inspection and arrived with an attitude that suggested he already had the verdict written. He paced through the kitchen like a predator sniffing out prey. He ignored spotless counters, organized refrigerators, and labeled spices. Instead, he pointed to minor imperfections: a mop leaning slightly the wrong way, a crate of vegetables delivered an hour earlier still waiting to be stored. Nothing remotely harmful, yet enough to twist into accusations. A Benny protested, tried to explain, begged for fairness, but Huxley wasn't listening. His smirk carried certainty. He was going to win. 2 days later, before brunch service, police cars lined the street. Patrons expecting breakfast were instead met with hostility. Officers ripped through the restaurant like they were dismantling a crime scene. Huxley barked orders. The orange sticker went up. Phones recorded everything. A Benny stood frozen, humiliated as customers who once loved her now questioned whether she was hiding something sinister. Rumors spread faster than truth. The internet doesn't ask for facts, only fuel. By evening, hashtags battled online. Hashtag protect black businesses. Hashtag shut her down. Her dream was padlocked, and her income evaporated in a single afternoon. But while devastation crushed her, destiny was already walking her way, in polished shoes, through marble hallways, under the weight of statewide power. Because in a matter of days, as Savannah watched this injustice unfold, someone else was watching too. Governor Lamar Hollington, a man known for bold decisions, had just heard of Benny's name for the first time, and what he learned next would change everything. The morning after the shutdown felt like waking from a nightmare that refused to loosen its grip. A Benny Carter sat at the edge of her bed, hands trembling, staring at a stack of unopened messages on her phone. Notifications from customers, business partners, church members, bloggers, and news outlets pulsed like tiny alarms. Some messages dripped with sympathy. Others offered conspiracy theories. A few were vile enough to make her question humanity. The internet, like fire, had no loyalty. It burned whatever fed it, but beneath the chaos, a deeper silence gnawed at her, the kind that sinks its teeth into your spirit. A Benny's Haven had not only supported her financially, it had stitched her identity together. Every meal she cooked was a prayer, every plate a testimony, every open door a declaration that black businesses belonged on the map. Now those doors were sealed shut. The restaurant cold as a tomb, lights off, ovens empty. Chairs stacked like coffins. Zola sat across from her mother at the kitchen table, watching her with the kind of intensity rare for a teenager. There was no whining, no dramatic self-pity. Just steady, unblinking loyalty. "Mom," she said softly, "we're not done. Don't let them think they won." Benny inhaled deeply. Zola was right, but strength isn't something that appears on command. It's something built, slowly, inside wounds. For now, her soul felt blistered. "I know, baby," Benny murmured, though her voice sounded borrowed. "But sometimes, it feels like everything I touched is turning to dust." Zola reached across the table, placing her warm hand on Benny's. "No," she said. "They don't get to define us." "We do." The conviction in her voice was startling. It was the same fire Benny once carried, before the officers barged in, before Savannah turned into a battlefield. Before her joy was treated like a crime, across town. In a conference room chilled by humming air conditioning, Detective Marshall Huxley leaned back in his leather chair as he read online comments with smug satisfaction. He never cared about soul food or community gatherings. He cared about influence, the power to bend rules, to silence voices, to decide who deserved to rise and who needed to be reminded of their place. His phone buzzed. It was Grant Norville, sounding anxious. "That video keeps spreading." "People are talking," Grant hissed, pacing. "It's making them suspicious." "This wasn't supposed to blow up like this." Huxley chuckled. "Relax, public outrage burns out faster than cotton candy. They'll move on." "You don't know the internet. These folks are emotional, and emotions fade," Huxley interrupted. Benny's done. Once the city stamps the closure, it's official. Nobody cares about ruined dreams. They'll eat somewhere else." Grant hesitated. He envied Huxley's confidence but lacked the spine to match it. River Crown Bistro was struggling, and each day Benny stayed closed bought him time. Yet a nagging fear twisted inside him like a worm burrowing into rotten fruit. What if she appeals? Grant muttered. Huxley smirked, amused. "To who? Her kind don't win appeals. Trust me." That sentence, "her kind," lingered like a rusted blade. Meanwhile, across Savannah, something else had begun brewing, something neither Huxley nor Norville expected. At a small coffee shop near the courthouse, Econ Rivers, Benny's most trusted employee, sat hunched over a laptop replaying the video of the shutdown. His usually calm face now hardened with fury. He didn't curse. He didn't slam fists. His rage manifested in silence, the type that bides its time. Econ wasn't just a kitchen prodigy. He was a man who believed in Benny's dream more than he believed in his own life plans. She had once saved him, literally and spiritually. Years ago, Econ had been on a bad path, drowning in anger after losing his brother to a senseless shooting. It was Benny who hired him when nobody else would. She told him that wounds don't define people, choices do. Over time, the haven became his refuge, Benny his anchor, Zola his little sister. They were family he hadn't known he needed. Watching the shutdown unfold felt like losing his brother all over again. No. This time he would do something. He opened his email and began writing a detailed account of the harassment. Dates, witnesses, the inspection irregularities. And Huxley's behavior, names, receipts, records, everything. He had kept notes over months, not because he expected an attack, but because he had witnessed the pattern the way a farmer senses a coming storm. Halfway through typing, he paused, rubbing his temples. Fighting a corrupt cop was not something ordinary people survived. Huxley carried a badge like a weapon. Men like him didn't lose, unless someone bigger stepped in. As if fate overheard that thought. His laptop dinged with a notification, a news clip about Governor Lamar Hollington. State governor looks to invest in black entrepreneurship. The headline read, Econ's heart thumped. Could this be the opening? He didn't know. But he knew he couldn't sit idle. He clicked the governor's official website, located the public inquiry channel, and uploaded everything: the shutdown footage, the timeline, the written harassment log. Then he hit send. Let the truth find the man who can handle it, he whispered. He did not realize those files were going to start a chain reaction. 2 days crawled by like years. The restaurant remained locked, the orange sticker stamped across the glass like a scarlet letter. People passed by in silence, some shaking their heads, others whispering, some filming themselves to gain online clout through someone else's misery. Benny tried to ignore all of it. But each glance at a restaurant felt like staring at a grave. "I worked too hard," she whispered one afternoon, voice cracking. "I didn't hurt anyone. I just wanted a place." Zola hugged her mother tightly. Places can reopen. People can rise. They can't erase your recipe. They can't erase you. Aiken walked toward them, wiping sweat from his brow. He carried a plastic bag with takeout containers, food from a friend who refused to let them starve while their livelihood was stolen. "You won't believe this," he said breathlessly. "We're trending again." Benny groaned. "Not again? I can't handle more mockery." "No, not like that," Aiken insisted. "This time it's positive. People are demanding answers. Influencers are talking. Church leaders are posting support videos. Someone even started a petition." Benny blinked. "Petition for what?" "To reopen the Haven." Her heart fluttered, not fully trusting but not entirely numb either. Before she could respond, Aiken's phone buzzed. His eyes widened at the message. "It says a representative from the governor's office tried to contact us," he said slowly. "They want to speak with you." Benny froze. She had never even dreamed of being noticed by the governor. Why would someone at that level care? Aiken showed her the email. It was simple, respectful. Official. Governor Lamar Hollington requests a private tasting and discussion regarding the shutdown. Please confirm availability. Zola nearly screamed, "Mom! The governor wants to eat your food." Benny's knees buckled as she sank onto a chair. Emotion rushed through her like lightning. Why her? Why now? It didn't matter. What mattered was this: someone powerful believed she deserved a voice. Hours later, the Haven's interior lights flickered on for the first time since the shutdown. The place still smelled faintly like dreams, spices lingering in corners, memories hiding behind counters, laughter haunting empty booths. Aiken rolled up his sleeves and began prepping ingredients, moving with the ease of a man born for kitchens. Zola swept floors while singing softly, as though her voice could wake the sleeping restaurant. Benny stood in the middle of it all, breathing in the air like medicine. "Why do I feel nervous?" she muttered. "Because this isn't a customer," Aiken replied. "It's a turning point." She stared at the table where she used to knead dough with her grandmother. She imagined Mama Dorothy standing beside her, whispering, "Feed people truth. And the truth will feed you back. Let's give him something unforgettable." Benny said finally. Night fell like velvet over Savannah. A black SUV pulled up outside the Haven, flanked by 2 security vehicles. Curious neighbors watched from porches and balconies. Whispering like wind chimes in a storm, the car door opened. Governor Lamar Hollington stepped out, tall, composed presence radiating authority without arrogance. He wasn't the stiff political stereotype people expected. He was a man who moved like he understood pain and purpose intimately. He entered the restaurant quietly, almost reverently, as if stepping onto sacred ground. "Benny Carter?" he asked, voice calm but firm. "Yes, Governor," she replied, trying to steady her heartbeat. "I've heard much about you," he said. "But I prefer to taste truth myself." Aiken served the first dish, smoked turkey wings glazed with honey pepper sauce. The aroma alone was sermon-worthy. The governor took a bite, closed his eyes, and exhaled, not politely but emotionally, like someone reliving buried memories. "This," he murmured, "is the kind of food that tells stories." Benny swallowed tears. "It's my family's story." He nodded slowly, then leaned forward. "Tell me what happened here." So she did. She told him everything: the inspections, the harassment, the closure, the humiliation. No exaggerations. No theatrics. Just truth laid bare like fresh dough waiting to rise. Governor Hollington listened without interruption, his jaw tightening the deeper she went. Aiken added details. Zola filled gaps with her fierce clarity. When they finished, silence hung like smoke. The governor placed his fork down with precision. This was not an inspection, he said. It was sabotage. Benny's breath caught. She wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. What happens now? She whispered. He stood slowly, gaze unwavering. What happens now, he said. Is justice. Those words ignited hope like a match dropped in gasoline. But neither Benny nor the governor knew that simultaneously. Someone else was watching from a car parked across the street, eyes narrowed. Breath cold, hands itching for retaliation. Detective Marshall Huxley was not done. He never planned to lose, and he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The governor's visit was supposed to be a secret, a quiet tasting, a private discussion, a stepping stone toward investigation. But secrets in Savannah were like cinnamon on cobbler. Once sprinkled, the whole town could smell it. By the next sunrise, whispers had evolved into wildfire. The governor ate at Benny's Haven. He loved the food. He's reopening the case. Church mothers repeated the rumor like scripture. Teenagers posted TikToks reenacting the shutdown while blasting gospel remixes in the background. Elders sipped sweet tea on porches, nodding sagely as if they had always predicted something monumental. Not everyone was thrilled. Inside River Crown Bistro, rage clouded the air thicker than overcooked gravy. Grant Norville paced behind the bar, gripping a glass so tightly it trembled. His chef team pretended to focus on orders, though few people were eating. Most of them simply sat, watching him unravel. How did she get him here? Grant barked. How? Do you realize what this means? The manager, a nervous man named Julius, cleared his throat. Sir, we still don't know if the rumor is true. It could be exaggerated. Grant slammed the glass onto the counter, shattering it. Nothing about that woman is exaggerated. He snarled. Her existence is a threat. It was the tone of a man being eclipsed by someone he deemed unworthy. And humility was not a virtue he possessed. Detective Marshall Huxley entered the restaurant through the back door, wiping rain from his jacket. His presence shifted the room like gravity tipping sideways. We have a problem, he said flatly. Grant turned to him with panic. You said this was handled. I said she was done, Huxley corrected, voice colder than enamel. I didn't expect the governor to get involved. Grant ran a trembling hand through his hair. So fix it. Huxley's jaw twitched. You don't just fix a governor. Grant leaned forward, eyes wild. Then bury her again. Do whatever you have to. There it was, the point where ego mutated into obsession. Huxley didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at his reflection in the polished countertop, expression unreadable. Be careful what you ask for, he murmured. Meanwhile, at Benny's Haven, relief mixed uneasily with dread. The governor's promise had planted hope, but hope alone could not rebuild a business, not yet. Still, that morning felt different. Benny woke with a sense that her breaths carried purpose again. The restaurant might still be padlocked, but something spiritual shifted, like her ancestors pressed their palms against her shoulders and whispered, Stand up. You weren't raised to fold. She walked to the Haven with Zola and Ekin, not to cook, but to clean, restore, prepare, as though joy might return any moment and needed somewhere to sit. As they dusted shelves and polished counters, Zola paused. Mom, she said quietly, pointing out the window across the street. Dozens of people stood with signs. We stand with the Benny. Black business matters. Food is culture. Let her feed us. Reopen the HAV. And tears rushed to Benny's eyes before she could stop them. Ekin exhaled sharply. This is bigger than a restaurant now, he whispered. It's a movement. Before Benny could speak, someone pushed through the crowd, a tall woman with fierce presence and a congressional pin gleaming on her lapel. She strode into the restaurant like a warrior entering her arena. Zola gasped. Mom, is that? Benny nodded, stunned. Congresswoman Raina Douglas, a civil rights powerhouse. A voice that rattled systems. A woman who did not show up for trivial matters. She extended her hand warmly. Miss Carter, I'm here because injustice has a smell, and I recognized it the moment I saw that video. Benny blinked. You know about it? Raina smiled grimly. Half the state knows now. You are not alone. Congresswoman glanced around the restaurant, touching chairs, running fingers along countertops, inhaling the scent of lingering spices. "This place isn't just a business," she said. "It's heritage. And someone tried to erase it." She turned to Benny, eyes blazing. "I don't take erasure lightly." Later that afternoon, Governor Hollington called an emergency meeting with key members of the State Commerce Committee. The room crackled with tension as officials debated the shutdown. Hollington remained quiet at first, fingers steepled beneath his chin, gaze cutting through excuses like a sharpened knife. A health inspector nervously flipped through fabricated reports. Another mumbled about anonymous complaints. A third cited community disturbance. Their voices faltered under the governor's stare. Finally, Hollington spoke. "Does this look like justice to you?" Silence. "Because when I tasted her food," he continued, voice slow and deliberate, "I tasted legacy, not negligence." One inspector swallowed. "Sir, protocol, Hollington interrupted, "is not a shield for corruption." He stood, placing a folder on the table. It contained Aiken's evidence, time-stamped harassment records, emails, witnesses, and most damning of all, audio clips of Huxley threatening patrons who visited Benny's Haven. The committee members paled. "You shut down a lawful black-owned business," Hollington said, voice rising, "because it succeeded too loudly." Not a single official dared meet his gaze. "I'm reopening this investigation," he declared. "And if anyone here tries to interfere, they will answer not only to me, but to the people watching." The words hit like thunder. Hollington wasn't protecting Benny for politics. He was protecting her because truth was the one meal he refused to let rot. Detective Huxley heard about the investigation by sunset. His fury simmered like a pot left unattended. He paced his living room, knuckles cracking, thoughts racing. People like Benny weren't supposed to rise. People like him weren't supposed to fall. He had built a career on intimidation, not integrity, and for the first time, someone with real power was shaking the walls of his empire. He stared at his badge. It no longer looked like an honor, it looked like an expiration date. Just then Grant Norville called. "You're going to fix this," Grant demanded. "If she reopens, I lose everything." Huxley's voice was calm, but something in it had snapped. "How far are you willing to go?" Grant didn't hesitate. "As far as it takes." A silence settled, the kind that forms before destruction. Huxley hung up. "Mine native iron. If a law wouldn't end Benny, something else would." Back at the Haven, night cloaked the building, but no one felt alone. Supporters still stood outside, chanting, praying, refusing to leave. Lanterns flickered. People passed out plates of food they had cooked themselves, as if keeping the Haven alive by proxy. Inside, Benny sat with Aiken and Zola at the center table, the same table where she had once dreamed her restaurant into existence. For the first time, Benny whispered, "I'm not fighting alone." Zola leaned against her shoulder. "You never were. You just didn't know we were here," Aiken nodded. "The truth always attracts its army." Benny smiled, a real smile, not the fragile kind stitched together by survival. Then a phone buzzed. Benny answered, expecting another reporter, but froze at the sound of the voice. "Miss Carter?" the caller asked. "This is Elijah Rowe, personal advisor to the governor." Benny straightened. "Yes, I need to warn you," Rowe said. "The governor is committed to helping you, but Detective Huxley has been flagged. He may retaliate. Please take precautions." "Do not be alone." Benny's blood chilled. "Retaliate how?" Rowe hesitated. "We don't know yet. But men who lose power rarely walk away quietly." Benny swallowed hard. "Thank you for telling me." When she hung up, Zola saw her expression shift. "What's wrong?" Benny looked at her daughter and at Aiken, two people she would die to protect. "We are not just fighting a corrupt system," she whispered. "We are fighting wounded pride." Aiken exhaled slowly. "Then we fight smart." Hours later, long after supporters went home, after lanterns dimmed and the street fell silent, Benny locked up and prepared to leave. Aiken walked her and Zola to the car. Their laughter floated briefly into the night, tired but hopeful. Across the street, a man sat in a parked car, engine idling, breath fogging the glass. Detective Huxley's eyes tracked them like prey. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, and in his glove compartment, something metallic gleamed. He wasn't thinking about the law anymore. He was thinking about legacy, his own, collapsing. He would not allow that. He turned the key and pulled out slowly, headlights off, tailing them like a shadow without mercy. This was no longer about a restaurant. This was a war of wills. One side fought for identity. The other fought to preserve dominance. And wars like these never end quietly. They explode, and the explosion was coming, not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. Benny Carter barely slept after the meeting at the governor's mansion. Her body was exhausted, but her spirit buzzed with a frantic energy she could not contain. She replayed Governor Ellison Ward's words again and again. "This isn't over, Miss Carter. You were wronged. And someone will answer for it." It was as if someone finally lit a torch inside a tunnel she had been stumbling through alone. She felt something she hadn't tasted in weeks. Power. But she also felt an invisible clock begin ticking. If a governor was involved, either justice would arrive spectacularly or the blowback would come like a hurricane determined to uproot her life. Ellison had scheduled a formal review of her case, and not just in private. He wanted it public, televised. That meant the city would watch her humiliation be dissected like a spectacle. Benny wasn't afraid of truth. She was afraid of their lies. She feared the police department's ability to fabricate, distort, or manufacture evidence. After all, they shut her down without cause once. They could try again, this time with amplified vengeance. Her grandmother's words pulsed in her mind. When wicked men lose control, their cruelty becomes their language. Still, she had no intention of stepping back. She chose to move forward like someone whose ancestors were watching. The next morning, she met with Governor Ward's legal investigator, a sharp, hawk-eyed professional named Cairo Benton. He was tall, athletic, and spoke like every sentence was being weighed against the law. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and a gaze so precise it felt as though he could see into the folds of her memories. "I need everything," Cairo said without preamble. "Receipts, permits, inspections, correspondence, your original license application, anything involving your restaurant. Governor Ward believes this case may reveal deeper misconduct." Benny placed a thick binder on the table. "I've organized every document since the day I bought the building. Dates, signatures, photos, all of it." Cairo flipped through the pages and his brows knitted. He paused at a particular inspection report. "This signature," he murmured. "This isn't from the authorized board. Someone forged it." Benny stared at him. "Forged? Why? Who would do that?" Cairo tapped the name beside the signature, Chief Aldrich Hawthorne. "The same man who oversees the unit that shut you down," he said. The realization descended like thunder. Aldrich wasn't simply aware, he orchestrated it. Benny felt her lungs tighten. Nothing had been random. Nothing had been accidental. They wanted her restaurant gone before it even became a legacy, but she still didn't know why. Across town, inside a towering gray police building where fear masqueraded as discipline, Chief Aldrich Hawthorne watched Benny's growing influence like a valve sensing shifting winds. He slammed the file shut, veins tightening on his fists. Deputy Marshal Huxley, the officer who led the raid, stood rigid before him. "You incompetent fool," Aldrich growled. "You were supposed to make her disappear quietly. Now the governor is sniffing around like a bloodhound." Huxley swallowed hard. "I didn't know she had powerful connections." "She looked like just another." Aldrich's glare froze him mid-sentence. "Finish that sentence," the chief whispered. "And I will bury you in paperwork so deep you won't see sunlight for a decade." Huxley clamped his mouth shut. Silence hovered like smoke. Aldrich paced the room, hands folded behind his back. His voice softened, but the softness was poisonous. "I want every scrap of leverage we have on her. Debt, tax records, personal history, social media. If she blinked wrong in the 4th grade, I want it documented." Huxley nodded, but Aldrich wasn't done, and listened carefully. "If we cannot destroy her credibility," he paused long enough for Huxley's heartbeat to stumble, "we will destroy her character." Back at Benny's apartment, she sat with her closest confidants, her Aunt Nadira Lawson, her sous chef Obina Marcellus, and her longtime friend Yara Dempsey, a graphic designer who once helped her create the restaurant logo. Nadira squeezed her hand. Child, you are walking into a den of lions. And some lions don't roar, they lie. Obina nodded grimly. Police harassment is a language in this city. They speak it fluently. Yara, always unfiltered, lean forward. Then speak louder. The governor believes you. That means cameras will show up. Don't be the victim, be the headline. Abeni looked at the three people who had stood beside her long before her restaurant smelled of golden brown cornbread. Her heart swelled with a fierce gratitude. You all saw what they did, she said softly. They tried to humiliate me in front of the world. They didn't shut down a building, they tried to shut down a dream. She rose slowly like someone preparing for war. They failed. Days rolled by, each more intense than the last. Cairo uncovered an avalanche of discrepancies, fraudulent signatures, hidden inspection records, unexplained fines, and, most damning of all, emails suggesting Aldrich was intentionally targeting select, black-owned businesses in certain neighborhoods. One email chilled Abeni to her marrow. Her restaurant is becoming a gathering point. Shut it down before it becomes a symbol. Abeni's eyes burned. She wasn't running a revolution. She was serving food. And yet they viewed her as a threat. But history had taught her something powerful. When black people create spaces of joy, belonging, and dignity, those in power often interpret it as rebellion. Abeni wiped her tears. There she smiled. Let them. Meanwhile, Aldrich realized his grip was slipping. City reporters were asking questions, and someone had anonymously leaked that Abeni was scheduled to appear at the governor's televised inquiry. His office received calls he couldn't ignore. The mayor's staff requested explanations. Social media tagged him in accusations of abuse of power. Fear invaded his arrogance. So he pivoted. He decided if he couldn't destroy her reputation before the hearing, he would do it during. To do that, he needed ammunition. Not truth, narratives. People didn't care about facts. They cared about how stories made them feel. He would tell one where Abeni wasn't a victim, but a fraud. Abeni noticed her street buzzing with unfamiliar vehicles. Darkly tinted cars parked near her apartment. Uniformed officers she didn't recognize lingered near corners. A woman pacing outside her building pretended to talk on the phone but kept glancing at windows. This wasn't coincidence. They weren't just investigating her, they were watching her. Then came the knock. Not loud, not frantic. Calculated. Abion. I looked through the peephole and saw a man in a charcoal suit, his expression sharp and emotionless. He held a folder. She opened the door only halfway. Yes? He spoke with a rehearsed calm. Miss Carter, you are scheduled for public inquiry on Friday. By law, you are required to submit personal records, including business tax summaries, employment details of staff, and any relevant financial data. Abeni crossed her arms. I submitted everything to Governor Ward's team. He didn't blink. Governor Ward's team does not oversee compliance. I do. Something wasn't right. His badge wasn't from the governor's office, it was from Aldrich's. Abeni didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She simply closed the door. Lock. Chain. Deadbolt. Silence. Then she whispered to herself. They're desperate. Caro confirmed her instincts an hour later. There wasn't compliance protocol, he said over the phone. They're fishing for inconsistencies. If they find nothing, they'll fabricate something. They're preparing an ambush. Abeni's heart hammered. What do I do? You prepare your truth, Cairo replied. And you remain calm? Corruption thrives on panic. He paused. And Miss Carter? Once lies start unraveling, they don't stop. The night before the inquiry felt like the night before battle. The city held its breath. Hashtags emerged. Hashtag let her cook. Hashtag justice for ABNI. Hashtag taste of freedom. Videos of the original restaurant shut down went viral again. Now framed with outrage instead of confusion, Abeni walked into the hearing the next morning with the quiet confidence of someone carrying her ancestors in her bloodstream. Her burnt orange blazer caught the cameras like flame catching dry wood. Governor Ward sat at the center, hands folded, eyes focused and unreadable. Then came Aldrich. He marched in with his entourage like a king arriving at court. His arrogance filled the room before his body did. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. He smiled as though the stage belonged to him. It did not. Governor Ward opened the session. We are here to determine whether state forces acted within legal and ethical parameters when shutting down Miss Benny Carter's restaurant. This inquiry concerns civil rights, property law, and potential abuse of authority. Aldrich leaned back, pretending to be bored. Ward turned to Benny. You may begin. Benny inhaled slowly. Her voice emerged steady and slow. Governor Ward, members of the panel. I built Benny's Haven with my own hands. I served food made from recipes passed down through my family. We were clean. We were compliant. We were successful. She paused, and someone wanted us gone. A hush swept the room. She continued. They didn't shut down a restaurant. They attempted to erase a legacy before it flourished. For them, my existence was a threat. Aldrich scoffed loudly. Benny turned toward him, eyes glinting with fire. And today I want to know why. Governor Ward nodded to KAIRO. KAIRO stood, placed a projector remote on the table, and clicked. The screen illuminated. Emails. Signatures. Forged documents. Inspection reports rewritten in different handwriting. Officer Huxley requested overtime for a raid before the city inspection that supposedly triggered it. Gasps erupted. Aldrich's face lost its smug composure. But it wasn't over. Cairo clicked. Again. An email appeared. Aldrich's own words. Black-owned establishments are multiplying in that area. If we don't control them now, we will lose jurisdiction. Shut them down before they become untouchable. Pandemonium. Reporters scrambled. Cameras zoomed in. Whispers turned to shouts. Governor Ward slammed his gavel. Aldrich tried to speak, but words tangled in his throat. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked exposed. Then Benny spoke again, her voice trembling not with fear, but with conviction. You didn't close my restaurant because it was unsafe. You closed it because my success offended you. The room erupted again. Governor Ward leaned forward. Double quotes. Miss Carter, is there anything else you wish this panel to know? Benny nodded slowly. Yes. She held up something wrapped in a cloth. Her grandmother's recipe journal. This is my heritage, she said softly. My restaurant wasn't a violation. It was a celebration, and no system will ever take that from me. Silence swallowed the room. Then applause thundered through it. Even the cameras trembled. Aldrich's kingdom had cracked. And the cracks were widening. The inquiry chamber was no longer a courtroom. It felt like a battlefield. The smell of adrenaline and fear thickened the air as cameras captured every second of Aldrich Hawthorne's unraveling composure. His hands, once steady and arrogant, twitched like a man holding onto a ledge that was crumbling beneath him. Governor Ellison Ward watched quietly, his expression unreadable, his posture that of a man who already knew a verdict had been sealed by truth rather than politics. Benny Carter remained seated, eyes forward, heart drumming with a rhythm that carried the history of defiant ancestors. She had not won yet, but power had shifted, and everyone in that room felt it. The police chief who once controlled cities with paperwork and menace now struggled simply to breathe without trembling. His downfall, however, was not a moment. It was a process, and that process was about to accelerate like a runaway freight train. Aldrich leaned toward the microphone, jaw clenched, voice jagged. This is a misunderstanding. The context of those emails is being manipulated. Miss Carter has. His voice cracked under the weight of evidence he could not rewrite. The audience bristled like a storm waiting to break loose. Reporters raised hands, but Governor Ward gestured for quiet. Aldrich tried again, sweat collecting at his temples. I was simply preserving regulatory standards. This is political theater. Governor Ward leaned forward. Chief Hawthorne, are you alleging that the documents presented today are fabricated? The silence that followed was suffocating. Aldrich realized the trap too late. If he denied the evidence outright, he would be challenging the governor himself, a political death sentence. If he acknowledged it, he would be confessing to abuse of power. His eyes flickered around the room like a trapped predator searching for any hole to escape. There were none. Benny watched the panic bloom, not with joy, but with something colder, vindication wrapped in exhaustion. Then came another blow. Kair Benton produced a sealed folder and placed it gently on the desk. "Governor, with permission," he said. Ward nodded. Kair opened the folder. Inside was a transcript, a recorded call. Questions rippled through the crowd like electricity. Cairo clicked a small device attached to the projector speakers. Then came Aldrich's voice, clear, inescapable, chilling. "Her restaurant is drawing attention. It's a cultural hub and it's growing. If it continues, others will follow. Shut her down. We do not need another symbol." The room turned volcanic. Gasps, shouts, reporters typing furiously. Benny felt her hands tremble. She had known they targeted her, but hearing the intent voiced aloud was like hearing the confession of a thief standing inside the ruins he created. Governor Ward's voice cut through the uproar. "Chief Hawthorne, this panel now has reason to believe that your actions were not only inappropriate, they were criminal." Aldrich snapped. He slammed his palm on the table, face contorted with rage. "You don't understand what's at stake. You think this is about one restaurant? This city is mine to control. And people like her." He stopped mid-sentence, but the poison had already spilled. The room froze. Ward stood slowly. His voice no longer calm. It was thunder controlled by discipline. "People like her?" he repeated quietly. Benny did not blink. Cairo did not move. The audience held its breath. Aldrich's mouth opened, then shut. His face flushed red as though the truth inside him finally clawed its way to the surface. He wanted to hide, but arrogance does not know how to crawl, only how to collapse. Governor Ward turned to the bailiffs. "Chief Aldrich Hawthorne is hereby relieved of duty pending criminal investigation. He is to be removed from this room immediately." Chaos exploded. Aldrich lunged. He wasn't aiming for Ward, he was aiming for Benny. His eyes were rabid, not with physical violence, but with a toxic hatred fueled by humiliation he could no longer outrun. He grabbed the edge of her table as though he could tilt fate itself. The officers intercepted him within seconds, pinning his arms behind his back as he snarled like an animal cornered by his own lies. Benny didn't flinch. She simply whispered one sentence, not for him, but for the history that birthed her resilience. "You can shut doors," she said softly, "but you can't shut destiny." Aldrich screamed her name like a curse as they dragged him away. The room erupted into applause, outrage, and disbelief. The inquiry wasn't over, but the villain had fallen, or so it seemed. 3 days later, news networks could not stop replaying the footage. Social media crowned Benny a symbol of resistance. Restaurants across the state put her next customer was the governor on chalkboards, shirts, menus, and banners. Strangers brought ingredients to her doorstep. Churches prayed for her. Schools discussed her case, but Benny wasn't celebrating because victory had a shadow, and that shadow wore a suit. Governor Ward requested a private meeting. Benny sat across from him again. Same polished table, same press suit, different energy. This time his voice wasn't gentle. It was cautious. "You understand your story has awakened something," he said. "Something bigger than this case." Benny nodded slowly. "People are tired of doors being closed in their faces." Ward tapped his pen. "It's not just the police department." Hawthorne wasn't alone. His strategy was part of a network: business associations, real estate developers, political donors. They want to keep economic power consolidated. They believe black-owned businesses shift demographics. Benny swallowed hard. "So my restaurant wasn't the target, my success was?" Ward nodded once, and now, he added, "they see you as a leadership threat." For the first time since the raid, Benny felt fear squeeze her ribs. She was a chef, not an activist, not a strategist. She just wanted to feed her community, but fate had other recipes. Ward leaned forward. "They will regroup. They will strike again. If you want to protect what you built, you need more than a restaurant. You need infrastructure." Benny stared at him. "Are you asking me to become political?" Ward didn't smile. I'm telling you, the battlefield found you. Meanwhile, inside a hospital room guarded by officers, Aldrich sat handcuffed to a bed. Rage carved dark lines in his face. His empire, built on intimidation, bureaucracy, and whispers, was disintegrating faster than he could process. But men like him rarely surrender. They retreat, recalibrate, and retaliate. A thin, well-dressed woman entered the room. Her stilettos clicked like cold punctuation marks on the sterile tiles. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to, Eldrick hissed. They turned on me. She didn't blink. No, you failed. She placed a card on the table. A symbol was stamped on it, a black circle with a cross through the center. Eldrick recognized it instantly. You want me to continue? He whispered. She tilted her head. You think this ends with one restaurant? Her voice was silk dipped in venom. Symbols are contagious. Then she walked away, leaving Aldrich trembling, not from defeat, but from renewed purpose. The war Benny never asked for had just expanded beyond city limits. Meanwhile, Benny stood outside the empty building where Benny's haven once thrived. Dust coated the windows. Silence replaced the laughter that once soaked its walls. She pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the memories beneath her skin. Benny Marcellus stepped beside her. You know, this isn't the end, he said gently. Benny exhaled. No, it's the beginning. He smiled. So what's next? Benny looked up, and her answer came not from her lips but from her spirit. We rebuild, she whispered. But not alone. She turned toward the street outside. Hundreds of supporters stood waiting, people who had never tasted her food, yet believed in her story. They held signs, ingredients, donations, and voices ready for the fight ahead. Benny walked to the front, shoulders squared. Chin lifted. Then she said the words that transformed a restaurant into a movement. This time, we cook for the world. The crowd roared. The movement ignited. And somewhere in a dark room, enemies whispered her name. Not with laughter, but with fear. The day Benny Carter reopened her restaurant, the sun shone like it had something to prove. It poured light onto the building's freshly painted walls, glinting off the golden lettering of the new sign, A Benny's Haven, where culture is FEDIA. Were no police barricades this time. No orange stickers. No whispers of illegitimacy. Instead, a line stretched half a mile down the block. Elders in wheelchairs. Children with flags, teenagers holding cameras, journalists adjusting microphones, and families who had driven hours just to taste a victory meal. But the reopening wasn't merely a business event. It was a cultural resurrection. Benny stood at the front door, apron pressed, curls pinned back, eyes shimmering with something deeper than joy, liberation. Zola and Ekin flanked her proudly. Caro Benton stood behind her with the calm satisfaction of a man who fought not for applause, but for alignment with truth. On the far end, Governor Ellison Ward approached. The same man who once walked in as a hungry stranger and now returned as a public ally. The camera zoomed in as he stepped onto the small stage erected before the entrance. There are moments, Ward began, voice booming, when history stops pretending it's invisible. Today is one of them. Applause rippled like thunder. This establishment was not shut down because of code violations, he continued. It was shut down because some people were threatened by what it represented: identity, excellence, and a refusal to apologize for either. Ward paused, letting the truth settle into the bones of the crowd. But when you try to silence a voice rooted in heritage, you do not suppress it, you amplify it. The crowd erupted again, chanting Benny's name. Ward raised a hand. This restaurant is more than a home for cuisine. It is a statement. It is a promise. It is proof that you may tear down walls, but you cannot tear down purpose. He stepped aside and motioned for Benny. Her knees trembled, not out of fear, but from the weight of finally exhaling after holding her breath for too long. She stood in front of the microphone, swallowing the swell of emotions rising in her chest. When they shut us down, she began softly, I thought I had lost everything. I thought the dream I built for my daughter and my community had been snatched from my hands. She looked at Zola, who stood tall, eyes glistening with pride. But what I didn't understand, Benny continued, was that sometimes the door that closes isn't blocking your path, it's redirecting you to your destiny. The applause this time wasn't loud, it was reverent. I believe my calling was to feed bodies, she said. But now I know my purpose is to feed spirits. The crowd responded with a roar that seemed to shake the street. Benny's Haven reopened with a ceremonial ribbon cut by 7 women from the neighborhood. Grandmothers who had supported her long before cameras showed up. They didn't need speeches. Their presence was the legacy. Once inside, customers found something astonishing. The restaurant had grown. There was now a community kitchen for youth culinary training, a mural wall honoring African ancestors and diaspora leaders, and a small library filled with cookbooks, memoirs, and cultural history texts. What had once been a restaurant reborn as a sanctuary of identity, the first dish served wasn't her bestseller. It was a new creation, one she had crafted after the raid. When tears and determination blended like spices in her heart, she named it the Unshakable Plate. Collard greens seasoned with stories, cornbread sweetened with hope, and turkey wings smoked over wood that had survived storms. A meal that tasted like survival, seasoned with triumph. People didn't eat silently. They wept, laughed, hugged strangers, and marveled at how food could carry both sorrow and joy without losing flavor. Children licked plates and asked for seconds. Elders cried into napkins while nodding at each other like prophecy fulfilled. Benny watched everything with hands trembling at her sides. It wasn't pride that overwhelmed her, it was gratitude. And somewhere in the noise, she heard the quiet truth: her restaurant was never shut down. It was reborn. A week later, Chief Aldrich Hawthorne sat alone in a courtroom, stripped of badge, title, and arrogance. His once commanding presence had withered. The judge listed his offenses: falsification of records, abuse of power, conspiracy against small businesses, targeted harassment, and the sentence was swift. Benny wasn't there. She did not need to witness his fall. She had already surpassed it, but the city was there and they cheered. Not because a man was punished, but because justice found its voice. Months passed, and Benny's Haven became more than famous, it became a pilgrimage. Travelers came from across the country. Chefs visited to study her menu. Professors lectured about her case. Documentaries were filmed. Cultural festivals were held in her parking lot. Her recipes became chapters in books and lessons in schools. She didn't plan any of it. Fate simply moved her toward it. One evening, after a long day of service, Zola sat with her mother on the restaurant's rooftop garden, an oasis of herbs and flowers overlooking the city. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Zola asked gently. Benny smiled, touching a leaf of fresh basil. "No," she whispered. "The old days taught me to cook. These days teach me to lead." Zola rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Benny closed her eyes, absorbing the warmth of legacy and motion. "I didn't do this alone," she said. "People fed me when I had nothing left. They became my haven when mine was taken." Zola squeezed her hand. "So what happens next?" Benny opened her eyes, gaze steady and unshaken. "We continue," she said. "Because hunger doesn't end, and neither does purpose." In the years that followed, Benny's Haven expanded into 3 cities, then 5. Youth trained in her kitchens went on to open their own establishments. Communities revitalized themselves around culturally rooted businesses. Economic doors once bolted shut were torn from hinges, and every grand opening began with the same phrase. Her next customer was the governor. Not because of who he was, but because of what it meant. Power had finally sat at the table it once tried to destroy. Benny Carter didn't just reopen a restaurant. She reopened a future, one meal at a time, one voice at a time, one truth at a time. And no badge, no bureaucracy, no fear-driven empire could shut that down again. Not now, not ever. If this story stirred something deep within you, then don't let it end here. You've just witnessed how a single voice, a single act of courage, can tear down decades of injustice and awaken a nation that once slept through oppression. Stories like this are not just entertainment, they are reminders of who we are and what we deserve. If you believe in justice, dignity, and the power of truth to reshape lives, then you belong with us. Hit the like button so the algorithm knows this message matters. Subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell, because more shocking, emotional, and thought-provoking stories are coming, stories that will challenge you, inspire you, and make you question everything you've been taught about power and fairness. Don't just watch history, become part of the community that demands better. Join us. The next chapter begins soon.